I'm Mike Ward and welcome to Conversations in Healthcare, a video series brought to you by DRG, part of Clarivate. The series examines the healthcare industry and its current business challenges and opportunities. And in each episode, I'm going to be talking to key leaders and how they are anticipating and navigating market dynamics. Currently, our series is focusing on the COVID-19 pandemic and the numerous challenges that it's actually unleashed on the healthcare industry. So this episode is also one of the ones that we are recording alongside On Helix, the digital conference that has been hosted by One Nucleus. In line with this, I'm delighted to be joined by Ann Lim, who is able to provide insights from a different perspective from some of the ones that we've had. Ann is currently the chair of the Scout Association, the voluntary organisation for young people that has a focus on providing them with skills for life. She's also a former chair of a private sector-led economic development partnership in the UK, which was established to stimulate innovation and inward investment. And previously, as a senior civil servant, she was actually responsible for the successful implementation of the UK government's e-learning initiative. It was called Learn Direct, as well as other e-services. So, Ann, I hope you and those you care about are keeping safe and well, and thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, it's a delight to do so, and yes, we're staying well and safe, thank you.
Great. So, Ann, the last time that I had the pleasure of actually speaking to you, it was during the final plenary session at Genesis, the One Nucleus meeting that takes place in December. Little did we know what was in store for us. How is COVID-19 affecting the work that you do, and what is your organisation doing to minimise the impact and stay true to its mission?
Well, I'm in the position where, as you said in your introduction, I chair the Scouts, which is a massive organisation across the whole of the United Kingdom. But I'm also quite regionally focused as chair of the Innovation Corridor, London to Cambridge. So looking at those two organisations and watching their response to this global situation is instructive, it's fascinating, and actually, it's very humbling. It's interesting to see some similarities as well. How are the organisations responding? Well, number one, and I slightly chuckle, but of course this hit the government as well, didn't it? They had to respond very, very quickly and get the whole of the workforce online, and that's obviously a common trait whatever industry or business that you're in. Social isolation and working from home, and the need to rapidly familiarize yourself with technology and schedule your life around meetings on platforms like the one we're using today was just a major adaptation to change. So the first thing is that people who have been quicker to adapt to change, who have been more open to change, I think, and can adapt to change positively, probably came through that first shock more effectively than others. But if I may, I think the second big critical factor is the way that you communicate to people. The leaders in organisations are suddenly actually able to be much more accessible. Ministers, civil servants, CEOs of companies can take to the digital media, to the airwaves, to the TV, and come right into our offices and our homes. And actually, in a crisis like this, you can never over communicate if you want good leadership. So the very fact that those leaders have been exposed. We've had high-level briefings from government, but companies have had to follow suit and look at the way they communicate. I think has been another very important aspect of how we're adapting to this changing workplace.
Right, and you mentioned that you still have a role promoting innovation. And previously you were the chair of the Southeast Midlands Enterprise Partnership, local enterprise partnership. How do you think the pandemic is impacting the activities of groups like that are actually there to sort of stimulate economic activity?
Yeah, well, I know for a fact, because actually only last week we had a couple of webinars with the local enterprises, and then one with the Centre for Cities that looked at things across the whole of England, and people spoke about the way in which they were responding and the role that clearly organisations that bring businesses together, that are in touch with businesses, that are in touch with their local authorities and work in partnership, are really critical to keeping a focus on the economy and keeping people in work. So if you just take the London-Cambridge Innovation Corridor, for example, and the local enterprise partnerships along there, from the mayoralty in London to the mayoralty in Cambridge and Peterborough as well, but with Hertfordshire and South East LEP in between, all of them are playing a key role with their local authorities to keep their ear to the ground in terms of businesses that are having difficulties. Business information, obviously that's being provided through the government as well, but people often need help, and let's have business growth hubs, which are the places that they're in touch with the businesses in their sub-region, in their local enterprise region, and can help them and guide them through all that they need to do, whether it's on furloughing or on advice about financial information and loans, etc. So actually having exemplary organisations that work in partnership, it's another important response to this crisis, isn't it? And it's another C word, it's collaboration. What is very, very clear and came very clearly through the webinars and the what we were hearing from all the businesses and the LEPs, the local enterprise partnerships, was that collaboration with each other was critical in terms of getting a handle on the issues and the problems and trying to solve them.
So, and as you mentioned, I mean, one of the main impacts of COVID-19 has been the sort of introduction of stay-at-home policies, which has been pursued by governments across the globe, and has forced people online. And whether that's to communicate with others, to try and work, or just for leisure purposes, what concerns do you have, though, about this phenomenon, the fact that people are isolated, that they're having to spend more time in front of their screens?
Well, I'm smiling, and I don't want to in any way appear smug or complacent. But it's the thing. I do have a few concerns, but fundamentally, I haven't got any concern really. And this is for the following reason. You mentioned in your introduction to me that 20 years ago, the new Labour days, a Blair government introduced, recognising that technology was going to come down the line, introduced a massive nationwide e-learning services program to get people online. It's called UK Online and Learn Direct, and I was responsible for the whole of that. The problem was there wasn't the impetus, there wasn't the need to change. It wasn't that people weren't competent or able to do it, there just wasn't a reason to have a digital switch. And actually, to be fair, 20 years ago, the technology wasn't fast enough, the platforms and the tablets and the accessibility wasn't as great. But the reality is human beings have infinite capacity for learning. I believe that as a teacher, which is what I was in an early life. They have an infinite capacity for creativity and for networking and for connecting and for supporting each other. And actually the kind of digital technologies that are connecting us all now are useful, they're exciting, and they do stimulate the brain and support us to do things in extreme circumstances, which is what we're facing now. So if anything, I've not been surprised. I've been almost reassured, actually, that this has been the impetus for people to change behaviours. And I'll just end with on this particular question with a very simple example. I mean, when we have the Scouts board meetings, which I chair, we have people from England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, because as you said, we're UK wide, and we usually meet in London, and we come together because we have a whole day and we have a lot of governance, and it's a big organisation, a big charity to administer and to scrutinise. And we had to have a board meeting online. Everybody came along. It was a very focused meeting. People at the end of it, when I did the evaluation, it was half the length of the normal meeting, but somebody said we did 3 times as much business. Many more people spoke because they could use a chat facility as well. There was greater participation and genuine learning. And they all said, why would we give this up? I mean, we will probably have some board meetings face to face in the future, but actually now we have made the switch to digital. Why would we go back when actually we're making massive cost savings as well? So there's an awful lot to be said for what has happened. You wouldn't have wanted COVID-19 to be the cause for this literally seismic change. But actually now it has happened. I feel it's irreversible. And although normal, in inverted commas, the habits that have formed over lifetimes won't change overnight, they will be adapted by the experience we have all had and shared.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the fact that originally there wasn't necessarily sort of the infrastructure or that catalyst to actually get people to change their behaviours. COVID-19 has obviously created that particular environment. From your experience, though, when you were pushing against probably a closed door initially, as companies are looking to transform themselves into this sort of digital world, what advice would you give to management teams to ensure that that help happens in the most efficient way?
That's a very good question. And actually giving advice, unless it's based on your, in my case, experience of what you know works or examples you've seen in other companies, is often a dangerous business to get into. But that said, let me share with you what I know and what I've learned, and actually what we know from companies that are successful in this. You've got to face reality. That means you will have a workforce, some of whom will like this way of working, will be, as we've been talking about, adaptable and flexible and will have been able to work with it. And there'll be others who one has to be much more sensitive and supportive of. I think the good thing about that is that actually it makes companies more open, or it should do, so that people can learn from each other, less worried about kind of egos and being more important than somebody else. If actually you've got the information, you can make something work, you've got a solution to something, then share it with somebody else, and that might spark an idea from them. I mean, the parallel there in relation to healthcare, as we know, is the way in which globally countries that are collaborating, companies that are collaborating, are advancing science and will, I have no doubt, ultimately find a way of finding a vaccine for COVID-19 and many, many other things. So the key to it is the learning from each other and communicating with each other, and being prepared to not stand on ceremony and hierarchy in your organisation or your company, but genuinely use the creativity and the talents and the abilities of all your workforce, and be open to that. It really is an opportunity to change closed organisational work cultures, or very what might you call those sort of work cultures where you have to be at your desk and be seen to be at your desk at a certain time. It's an opportunity to get a greater work-life balance in amongst your workforce and amongst your employees, and to use the skills and talents of everybody.
Yeah, sure. Although I can imagine that that there is a challenge that when working from home, if the phone goes and you happen to gone to the toilet, or you've gone to make yourself a cup of tea and you've missed that call, you kind of feel sort of like desperate to get back to that person almost immediately to sort of say, oh, I was here, really. I wasn't sunning myself in my back garden. So I can imagine that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you really raise a very interesting question for people to ponder, because actually, when we come to work, if we're coming to a normal office or a factory or a research laboratory or a radio studio, we don't actually leave the hinterland of our families and caring responsibilities or our own mental health or our own work preferences behind, do we? They are a part of us, but that can get forgotten about. In reality, we're a bit more exposed here with this digital technology. I mean, not least the amusing. I remember when I watched the first edition, or listened to the first edition of The World at One, and Sarah Montague was doing it from her kitchen, and I was fascinated to see what her kitchen looked like. Well, actually, we've now not just got what Elizabeth I called windows on the world into men's souls. We've actually got a little bit of a window into people's homes, and that means we recognise it when the kids come in because they're having to be homeschooled at the moment, or when we do need to take a break. And if I can just say, as far as us managing staff, again, within the Scouts organisation, we've been saying to people, please take breaks, because for the first 4 to 6 weeks, they were doing so much on Zoom and working so to catch up there with their emails and phone calls, just like you've said, answering, responding, because there was so much to do to respond to a crisis, that the working hours were intolerable. And this is now a question of people having, I think, an opportunity to have a mature debate about what works. I mean, another quick example, sorry, the ideas are just streaming from my mind, but is look how Parliament's working now. I mean, wouldn't it be good if they could blooming well sort Westminster out, because it's in a state, the actual Palace of Westminster, by actually taking quite a bit of Parliament back into the constituencies of people, and recognising that we, as I say, all have multiple aspects to our lives. We are not monochrome, single dimension people, and we are human, and we have a lot of different human needs.
Yeah, mentioning the Parliament, the debates are far more civilized. The fact that you don't have the braying that tends to be associated with them.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think you have the accessibility, to go back to what you were raising at the beginning of this discussion we're having. In a sense, things are much more accessible and open now. The government has had to be as open as it can be about explaining to people, and so we're able to challenge it. And given the state of democracy pre this, I mean, again, you would not want a pandemic like this that has drastically affected and tragically affected the lives of so many people so quickly to happen, to make this happen. But the fact that we might have become a bit more respectful and civilized and listen more to each other and learn from each other, I have to say, is a very good thing, I think, for the has.
Yeah. So beyond clearly the sort of the devastating healthcare impact that COVID-19 has wrought upon us all, we're also witnessing sort of a severe downturn in economic activity, which has resulted in higher unemployment. With young people, and I'm sort of, thinking about you sort of with your chief scout hat on, or leading scout hat on. Young people are, I've seen reports, are especially sort of vulnerable to the fact that they're about to join the workforce. Therefore, they could be the worst hit because there might not be the jobs available, etc. So, what should we be doing to sort of minimise the impact on their welfare and employment prospects?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's very, very dear to my heart. Young people in this generation of, in our case, as Scouts, it's 6 to 25-year-olds, in fact, the innovation corridor, just to link back to my other role as well, is working very closely with those skills providers for the sort of 14 to 21, 25-year-olds, because it is absolutely clear that generation are going to be affected by what could turn out to be, the recession to end all recessions. I also know that from the companies that we're talking to in the innovation corridors, we said that people are really, really struggling. And once the furloughing goes, the reality is going to really smack them in the face. Actually, I think it's an opportunity to concentrate on those skills for life that you mentioned at the beginning, and that we as Scouts are so keen to embrace. And some of those are much more the softer skills, like empathy, alongside those tough skills like resilience, never giving up. They might seem contradictory, those two things, but actually, if you've got an ability to relate to others, and also you've got the kind of inner core strength to face the knocks yourself and pick yourself up and develop your own inner confidence, supported by others, then you're going to be the kind of person that will be able to mentally help yourself and everybody else through this crisis. But there's a more significant, well, not more significant, but an equally significant point here. This is the time to develop new skills. Apprenticeships must not be stopped. Companies may well be having to reduce the number of people, but actually the government should not stop, and the companies should not stop investing in them getting those technical, craft, academic, all manner of qualifications, because we will get through a recession. We know we will, and actually the way we'll get through it is by training and having highly skilled people in the sort of economies that globally we need to operate in, and healthcare is certainly one of those. Life sciences and medtech are absolutely key to helping this country recover, and it's all aspects of healthcare. If I can just give a little plug to One Nucleus and to the whole of the innovation corridor and the companies there. Of course it's the research companies and the world leading pharma and medtech people that we have in this corridor, but it's also the supply chains to those organisations, and indeed the manufacturing supply chains. We could be manufacturing that PPE, we could have been manufacturing the bulk of that PPE stuff here instead of going to Turkey and China, wherever else we went to get it in this crisis. So I think this will require us to deal with a recession, of course, but to re-examine the nature of the skills for the future. And that's actually why just last week, all the FE colleges in the Innovation Corridor collaborated in a webinar. It was a global skills showcase to exemplify the work that they were doing with local employers to keep a focus on those skills. And it's why the Scouts are really focusing on life skills, skills for life, that will just enable young people not to be defeated by the economic recession.
So watching the heroic efforts of frontline workers in the healthcare and social care settings, and also sort of the increased recognition of the positive contribution that scientists can make to society. do you think this might actually encourage more young people to seek careers in these sectors?
Actually, Mike, I do. And I'll tell you why. And it's kind of one of the, minor benefits of getting older, that you've seen a bit of life and you know some things that work and some things that don't work. And what does work are inspirational role models that we can identify with and say, oh, that person's like me, or oh, I want to be like that person. And the long overdue recognition of NHS and social care workers, of key workers, the contribution that they make in the economy and the vital role they play in our personal lives, whether it's hairdressers or people that attend to any form of personal service that we require. The deprivation from that and the need for that in our lives, and a recognition of the role that those people play, I think will have an influence. I also think that in relation to science, I think we have not in this country given standing to the role of science and technical education and engineering, the STEM subjects they're often referred to. We've not given that recognition that would have encouraged generations to take up careers. And I think this is an opportunity when they see the scientists, men and women, people of all colours, standing in front of the podium with the politicians, and we are, to quote, following the science. We're seeing those experts being believed more, having rubbished them up until relatively recently. I think all of that will be a genuine pull and a huge attraction, and I very much hope it is for young people and others to go back into science. It's never too late. If you're 30 or 40, we will need scientists of all kinds as we continue to evolve and innovate.
So you mentioned sort of the potential role of apprenticeships, etc. What do you think companies need to do to attract young people to sort of join them?
Gosh, that's a big question. I think that the discussion about universities not being able to be the social places that young people go to, yes, to study, but also to have a good time and to meet people. The fact that University of Cambridge shifting everything online until the following year, so that a whole year of undergraduate study, the fact that the appeal of universities will be changing might actually be an opportunity for employers, particularly those who are committed to apprenticeships, and there has, thankfully, over the last 5 years been a much greater commitment to technician and craft training, level 2, level 3 and degree apprenticeships. It should be an encouragement to them that, that with social distancing, you probably can go to work and stage your work so you can do your on-the-job work at work and pick up some of those skills working safely with others, and then you can do your studying online, and it's probably going to be a much more attractive package for young people considering apprenticeships, and in turn that will give the talent and skills to employers, which should be their incentive, no matter what size the firm is, for them to put on an apprenticeship scheme.
Great. So just as a final question, listening to what you said about sort of, the way that people have actually managed to embrace digital transformation, etc., and the way that people are sort of behaving differently. What do you think the sort of the positive long-term impacts of our experience of the pandemic is going to have on society and companies and even young people?
Well, you're asking me to prophesy into the future and just take a stab there at what might remain. So it is a guess. I would admit that. I think there's something about, isn't there? It takes you 29 times. I don't know why the magic number is 29 times of doing something new and different for it to become a habit. Well, we've definitely probably all done 29 Zoom meetings now. And so perhaps some of those habits of using digital technology will have become internalized and become second nature. What I hope, and it is a hope, will be maintained into the future, and it kind of summarizes all I've been saying in our discussion here. What I really hope is that a greater level of willingness to be understanding of the other, to value those people who are different from us, to inquire about those jobs in detail that we didn't know very much about, but thought that we did know and we took for granted maybe. A kind of respect and a celebration of the environment that we live in and the impact that we're having on that environment by the way we do things. I rather hope that some of those personal behaviours will change faster. Obviously, there are whole issues to do with the cost of climate change and the impact on industries in aviation if we don't fly so much. But actually, we all deeply know that we needed to change our ordinary lives in some way. So if we could become better, without sounding, I hope, too motherhood and apple pie here, if we could retain something of that decency and niceness and cooperation in our communities and change our behaviours a little bit globally, just not travel so much by car, unless it's electric, but even then, by plane, by train, and we can maintain the level of civilised behaviour that by and large the rule of law has seen in this country anyway, phenomenally applied, then I think we will actually be a stronger and a more cohesive society. And that is vastly different from where we were this time last year.
And as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. And you've definitely given us food for thought, and also I guess some sort of optimistic thoughts as well. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. So if after listening to this broadcast you've got questions for either me or for Anne, please click on the link at the end of the video. We'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to give us the feedback because that's going to help us make conversations in healthcare as useful as possible. If you'd like to tune in to future conversations in healthcare, follow our LinkedIn page. That's where we'll be posting alerts to future episode releases. In closing, I'd like to thank Anne again for joining us, and also thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. I'd also like to say thank you and show appreciation from me and everyone at DRG and Clarivate to all of those in the healthcare industry who are working tirelessly to help people survive this crisis. We're all indebted to you. So until next time, stay safe and healthy. I'm Mike Ward, and I'll see you in the next episode.